Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant. We welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers and a happy Mother's Day to the moms out there. Our guest today is the Governor of the Commonwealth, Andy Beshear. It's been a busy time for the governor, who was in the spotlight last weekend when he presented the trophy to the winner of the Kentucky Derby and took a moment to make a little pro-Kentucky speech. That came after the governor made an overseas trip to visit with company leaders considering or doing business in Kentucky, and that was just after the General Assembly wrapped up a 60-day session that included passing a new 2-year state budget. The governor signed most of what the legislature passed. He vetoed some bills, only to see his objections overridden. A recent Morning Consult poll pegs Beshear's approval at 65%, among the most popular governors in the country. We welcome Governor Beshear back to Kentucky Newsmakers. Thanks for being here. We appreciate you coming.
Thanks for having me, and happy Mother's Day to my mom, to Brittany's mom, and to Brittany, who is a great mom.
There you go. All right. And as we're taping this earlier in the week, we'll make note that we're facing once again some potentially tough weather, and that has been something that in your administration you've had to deal with several times.
We have. We faced the deadliest tornadoes we've ever faced in 2021, the deadliest flooding we've ever faced in 2022. We faced ice storms, windstorms. We faced multiple polar plunges. My hope, since we're taping this before the weather hits, is that everybody stays weather aware. In the last couple of events, they could have been bad, but people were careful, and that's what we need. You know,
we were just talking as we sat down, you also dealt with the pandemic, and there were so many emotions attached with that. Have Kentuckians fully processed what we went through and got through during that time?
I don't think so. I mean, this is the challenge of our lifetimes. It killed more Kentuckians than World War I, World War II, and Vietnam put together. So there's a lot of loss. There was also a lot of change and uncertainty. And I'm a little worried by not talking about it, by not wanting to go there. We haven't fully processed everything we went through. I mean, our economy has changed significantly in a really positive way since then, but we also have a lot of people who are really heroic during the pandemic that we haven't thanked in a long time, and I think that they still feel hurt, coming out of that. This was a major event, and just trying to forget it probably isn't the best way for our mental health. To address it, to learn from it, and to move on from it.
Yeah, maybe it's only now that we can really, think about it and with some objectivity.
Maybe we needed some time.
You're coming off a big weekend, last weekend, lots of visibility. How important is the Kentucky Derby for the Commonwealth economically?
Oh, enormously. It has at least a $400 million impact. It brings 150,000 people to Louisville and the area. 18 to 19 million people watch the race, and it's called the Kentucky Derby. Pimlico, the Preakness and the Belmont don't get that. And so we truly get to showcase everything going on. And whether it's the lead up to it, whether it's the 1-minute speech I get to give about Kentucky, talking about the biggest, best economic development win streak we've ever been on, more private sector investment than ever before, breaking export and tourism records, it's a chance to tell people our story. And so much of that has changed in the last 4.5 years. How we're viewed nationally, how businesses are picking us first. And so what we're saying right now is welcome to our new Kentucky home. Let's tell you a story about prosperity and opportunity, and let's ensure we're using the Kentucky Derby to bring people in and getting them to spend their tourism dollars here, but then moving here and being a part of what we've got going on.
You give some thought to those few seconds that you have, huh?
I do. I watched my dad do it for about 8 years. I got to think about it my first year, which was in the middle of the pandemic, and I couldn't do it. You want it to be short. You want it to put the best light on Kentucky, and then you want to make sure you don't drop the trophy.
Right. Oh, good. You also recently returned from a trip to Europe to talk up Kentucky. Do you? What should we expect from that?
We should expect jobs.
Really?
Yes. So I did multiple meetings daily. People think that maybe I saw different sites in Germany. I didn't. I saw every boardroom, I think, that exists across Germany. And we have these different large multinational corporations in different towns. And so we started in Hamburg and then went south. Met with employers that employ about 15,000 Kentuckians right now. We're able to convince one of them to stay in Kentucky that had been looking at other places. But all of them are looking to expand in the United States, a lot of German companies that expanded in China, and now they're trying to at least hedge their bets and their risk. But we got great companies. One's called Hinkle. They make Snuggle fabric softener and Dial soap in Bowling Green, Kentucky. They have a lot of employees there. Mubia is up in northern Kentucky and have over 1,000 employees there in the automotive sector. And it's important to go to these great employers where they are, at their home, at their headquarters, to thank them, to continue a personal relationship, but also to talk about expansion. And we will absolutely see jobs coming out of it.
They ask you a lot of questions about Kentucky?
They do. Now, most of them have been to Kentucky at one point. One of them my father visited a number of years ago, so that was a first. But they're all interested in expansion. They get that we are in the best place logistically in the country to make things and then to ship things. They love Worldport in Louisville, DHL in northern Kentucky, because then they can ship internationally so easily. But it's also really important to talk to companies that are looking to have a U.S. presence. I mean, we end up being very good at being the first location, like Toyota chose in the 1980s. The first location to manufacture something in the United States, because you can reach 60% of the population, and we're good at it. We're good at welcoming a company in, making connections, and then the last piece is speed to market. We've proven that we can get people up and running faster than anywhere else. When Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary, was in to see advanced nano products in Elizabethtown, they told her they got built and were operating 6 months faster than they had ever seen anyone in the industry. That made me feel pretty good, and they said it to Janet Yellen. Is
it more important that Kentucky try to lure new businesses, or that you try to sustain and help the ones who are already here?
Well, it's both, but that second part is really important. We need growth from our companies, and certainly small and medium-sized businesses expand and create more jobs than any of the new big ones we could bring in, even as hard as we work for them.
Governor, how do we fill the jobs with the workforce at this point? Does that become a concern to you?
It's just another challenge, but it's one we're meeting. So look at Blue Oval SK. Largest investment in our history, $5.8 billion, eventually 5,000 jobs. They've already filled 750, and they haven't had any problems to do it. And so our goal is to be a good partner, right? The company is going to have to meet the wages, and it's going to have a good culture. But then it's what type of pipelines can we create? And the legislature has helped us in that on a number of fronts. The $300+ million going into career and technical education in our high schools. We're doing this right when we're bringing jobs of the future in. We can change our training, the equipment that's in there, really prepare students. And what it's doing for nursing at the same time has been pretty special. The Education First Employer program at our KCTCs have really opened the doors up in a way that's never happened before. And they're saying to business, give us your curriculum. Our engineering schools, U of L is expanding, UK is always growing. Really important to meeting those workforce needs. But it's about that direct relationship where you say, give us the menu that you need of different types of training, and let us meet it.
So we're doing, you think, a good job of matching the educational opportunities and career tracks to the jobs that are going to be available.
I think we're ahead of other states. The way workforce training is done has changed dramatically. This used to be something the private sector did and did fully, and then we work on education curriculum. We graduate people with this degree and hope they found each other. Now the private sector wants us to be more directly active and responsible for workforce training, so everyone is changing. I believe Kentucky is ahead of other states. I believe it's because we already had good bones between our CTEs and our community colleges and our universities. But we still have to innovate, and we have to continue to move and try new things if we want to stay ahead of other states and ultimately be that destination.
The Volkswagen plant in Chattanooga recently unionized, and there's an upcoming vote at a Mercedes plant in Alabama. This is a right-to-work state here in Kentucky. Do you expect more foreign-owned auto plants to be unionized?
Well, I think you're definitely seeing a push from the UAW at some of them. We've seen different opportunities in the past as governor. I've got a good relationship with the UAW. I also have a good relationship with Ford and Toyota, General Motors, and the others. It's important to recognize that everybody is out there in different ways, trying to ultimately help our people, and so we'll see as it moves forward in Kentucky.
A difficult balance for you, though, isn't it?
It can be, but again, part of it is knowing that people may be coming at it from a different angle, but if they are all trying to come at it from wanting the very best for our Kentuckians, then that's something you can get behind.
The General Assembly passed more than 200 bills, including a state budget.
They passed a lot.
They largely ignored your proposals and went with their own priorities, and then ultimately you did sign the budget into law. Is that a budget that will move Kentucky forward in your view?
So I would say that they disagreed with a couple of our big priorities, and that's going to hurt Kentucky in the years moving forward. We desperately needed a large raise for our teachers. It needed to be mandatory. Tennessee has done it. Indiana is looking at it. Tennessee's gone to top 10 in teacher pay, and we just fell from 40th to 41st. My plan would have moved us to 25th in 1 year. If we truly care about our kids, if we care about workforce training, it starts in our schools, and we have to invest. Universal pre-K is another thing that they ended up refusing to fund, and that's a no-brainer. I mean, we have almost half of our kids showing up for kindergarten not ready, and some of them never catch up, which means we lose that part of our population in terms of being workforce ready. But when you look at a lot of other pieces, economic development, we got both two pots of money that have helped us bring in a lot of these jobs, re-upped, which was important. We got more transportation dollars on the education side. We got more dollars for higher education. We got some matching dollars on the transportation side, and an overall transportation budget that maybe we can be a little bit innovative with. So, this was a session that could feel negative, and sometimes could even feel a little toxic. People yelling at each other, even in the same party. But I do think we got some positive things coming out of it, and my job is not to make excuses. No matter what budget they give me, my job is to move Kentucky forward. We did that in 21, and 22, and 23, and we're going to do that in 24.
They did several projects, and much of that they said was because it was one-time money that could be spent, and that, for instance, the teacher's raise would have been a recurring cost. You do the 11%, then it's 11% more every year. Do you buy that? So
we could afford both the teacher raises and universal pre-K in the surplus dollars we were bringing in the general fund. That's recurring revenue that comes in each year. The one-time funds are what we have in the rainy day fund. For instance, every projection that we see that is done by an outside group of economists says that we can easily afford those raises, that we can easily afford universal pre-K. So that falls in that recurring pot that, again, my budget was much more fiscally conservative than theirs. They end up spending much more of the rainy day fund than I did. But certainly the infrastructure projects that they put in, it's appropriate to do those from one-time funds, to do extra water projects, sewer projects, economic development projects. And those are the types of expenditures with one-time funds that make sense. And I don't want to criticize them for spending those one-time funds on that. We had more than we needed in our rainy day fund. So as long as we have enough to continue to get bond rating upgrades, upgrading a water system, more money for roads, those are all really good things that we worked at the General Assembly on.
Governor, you vetoed several measures that were then easily overridden by the legislature. That includes the Safer Kentucky Act, the crime bill. You said you liked part of it, but had reservations about others.
Well, they overrode most vetoes. I think there was one bill and then one light item that they didn't. Let me start by saying the first thing I ever ask about a piece of legislation isn't whether it was sponsored by Democrats or Republicans or whether it's left or right. It's will it work? I remember vetoing one piece of legislation where they said that Vital Records had to provide the State Board of Elections these reports every so often. Well, the reports don't exist. That's what the Vital Statistics folks said. We don't even know what we'd provide them. So I vetoed it because it won't work. But, you get into this, I'll show you, or we're the legislature and you're the governor, and they overrode a veto again. It's not going to work. There's no report to give them. When it comes to the Safer Kentucky Act, there were parts that are really important and are now law, like murder weapons not being auctioned off to the highest bidder. That's something very personally important to me after I lost Tommy and others in the Old National shooting. Having a crime of carjacking specifically is important because it lets us track it with the data and fully understand what's happening. But criminalizing homelessness is just against my faith. I mean, when I talk to different ministers, mine and others who came in, they asked the very specific question, Andy, if Jesus returned, where do you think he'd be? Who do you think he'd be ministering to? And should we treat an abandoned car better than a car with a person inside of it? And in the end, my faith, my values is my why in public service. And that drove me to a veto there. But the other part of that bill is it won't work. So there's no question that what they did is increase crimes and increase penalties. So we'll have more people going to jail and for longer. But they didn't increase the corrections budget. In other words, we're going to have more people coming in, but we don't have more money, and each one costs money. And then what they did is limit the amount we can go over, and they limited it more than ever before in history. So not only do we have more people coming in and more costs, but at one point, we're not allowed to even pay the bills when more people are into county jails that are holding people, or to be able to hire the staff that's needed. We're going to have to call a special session just to pay our bills.
All right, we're with Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear. We'll be back in a moment. We'll talk about school choice amendment, which is coming up, and Kentucky's new and incoming education commissioner. More Kentucky Newsmakers with the Governor of the Commonwealth in a moment. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers on WKYT. Governor Andy Beshear is our guest today, and we're continuing our conversation. The state Senate confirmed Robbie Fletcher to be Education Commissioner, and he's laid out his priorities now for the state. Do you believe he'll have a good working relationship with you and the legislature, which may not always be, as you said, on the same page?
Well, I hope so. I've known Robbie Fletcher for a while, and what I really hope is that he will be willing to do what's right. In the end, as a commissioner of KDE, you're responsible for public education in Kentucky, and that shouldn't be ideological. It should be about what's best for the students, and sometimes that means you can run into conflict, and that can be with all different types of groups, but your job is to do the very best for the students in Kentucky and for public education in Kentucky. And that's what I hope he'll do.
The school choice amendment is coming to the ballot this November with indications there will be campaigns on both sides pushing it and opposing it. You oppose it. What role will you take in that effort?
I oppose it 100%. Public dollars are for public schools, period. You can send your kids to private school. That's a choice that the parents can make, but you don't get to bring state public dollars to pay for it. I will campaign hard against it, and we will defeat it. All those public school teachers, everybody who is an educator deserves better than this. What this is really about is the money, and private corporations trying to get a cut of that money. Any of this innovation or less restriction argument that's out there, give public schools that opportunity. Remove some of the restrictions on them. Don't force public schools to operate by certain rules where you think they're failing, and then give money to private schools that don't have to.
When the argument is made that a child is trapped in a failing public school, what do you then say?
Fix the public school, because if you say move that one child, what about the next one and the next one and the next one? Our goal here is to bring all public schools up, and all they're really trying to do is move the money. We don't know that private school is any better. They don't have the same reporting requirements. They don't have the same measurements that we do. And we've seen in other states that it doesn't necessarily lead to more success, and some states have even created these private voucher schools that are merely holding areas for students that don't move the needle. Public schools, if you want them to work, fund them. You're paying teachers 41st in the country, and then you're saying, why are schools failing? We didn't fully fund transportation costs, even though the law says you have to. We're not funding textbooks and further training. If you really want public schools to succeed, fund them. Because right now, the legislature is not. And the idea that you would then take some insufficient funding and cut it by whatever amount and send it somewhere else is only going to make the problem worse.
Are you watching the situation at the University of Kentucky where there was a vote of no confidence in the president, Eli Capilouto, after the board that you have largely appointed decided to take power away from the faculty senate and make its role advisory?
Well, I've learned a little bit about it. I haven't been following it closely, but these are all adults. These are all adults at a university, one where, right now we're trying to model correct behavior for students here and, in fact, all over the country. And it's my hope that as adults, they ought to be able to come together at a university and figure out a common governance that ensures that everybody has a voice. With us talking about free speech, but the natural limitations to keep everybody safe. Now's the time when adults should show how it happens.
Attorney General Russell Coleman is leading a group of attorneys general challenging U.S. Education Department's decision to widen protections under Title IX. You disagree with his move?
Well, I haven't gotten in and seen the specific parts of that legislation. What worries me is whether every Republican attorney general or every Democratic attorney general sues this or sues that, because that's when it becomes political instead of an attorney general that's supposed to represent a state doing what's best in the best interests of the state. And beyond whatever impact this would have on sports, my hope is the way that our attorney general and others talk about it is one that doesn't demean people in the LGBTQ community. These are Kentuckians. These are children of God. These are our neighbors. These are our neighbors' children. And we should not be ostracizing very important kids and Kentucky citizens. We ought to be treating them like the friends of our kids.
Do you feel we're making progress on the opioid crisis in Kentucky?
I do. Now, we got hit hardest. We got hit first. We have lost way too many people. But measurement after measurement is starting to come in and show progress. You look at the fact that the last time they measured, which was 2022, we were one of only 8 states that had a significant decrease in overdose deaths. That's a big deal, even if they're too high, which they are. We were ranked number 1 in adult mental health services, and that includes addiction services last year. And a recent study, I think it's by East Tennessee State, has us number 1 in the country per capita in treatment beds. Those are all important. It's also the great work of all of our first responders, of EMTs, of police and others. It's the availability of Narcan and naloxone. And the last thing is it's tearing down the stigma that's there. If you need help, get help. People care about you. They love you, and we don't want to lose you.
About a minute left. We noted your approval at 65% in that morning consult poll. You are term limited. You have formed a PAC. You are giving money to candidates in state and out, and traveling some out of state for political reasons. Where do you think the future is going to take you?
Well, we'll see. I mean, the reason that I'm traveling is in Kentucky, and it's not just me, but I believe that we have figured it out a little bit. We've pushed away the noise. Certainly that election in November wasn't about Democrat or Republican. It wasn't about moving right or left, but moving forward. And a lot of that, I think, is but also the Commonwealth's focus, not on the issue of the day in Washington, but the things we worry about when we wake up: jobs, our next doctor's appointment, the roads and bridges that we drive, public safety, our public schools. Those are the things that can lift everybody up. And if we could get back to just working on those, then maybe neighbors wouldn't be yelling at neighbors. And people are just so exhausted of the back and forth. But I'd say I got into this not to be governor. I never thought that I would run for governor. Dad being governor was enough. But because I thought I could really make a difference, because I thought I could make a better world for Will and Lila and everyone else, and that we could bring people together. And so any decision I make in the future won't be about whether I can be this or that, but whether I can make a difference.
But if, again, you thought there was a difference you could make, you might go for it.
If I think I can make a difference, if I thought I could bring people together more nationally than just in Kentucky, it's something I'd really consider.
Appreciate you coming in today. Thank you very much. And let's hope the weather kind of calms down through this summer, right?
Absolutely. Thank you, and happy Mother's Day.
All right. Governor, thank you. We'll be back on Kentucky Newsmakers with a word about next week's guest in a moment. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers from WKYT. Later this week, early voting begins in Kentucky's May primary. And ahead of Election Day, we're taking a look at some of the races on the ballot. House District 76 encompasses part of Fayette County. The seat has long been held by State Representative Ruth Ann Palumbo, who was first elected to the House in 1990. But for the first time in decades, Palumbo is not seeking re-election. 3 candidates are now fighting for her seat. Ann Gay Donworth is a nonprofit executive, business owner, and a native Lexingtonian. Josh Buckman is a medical social worker who says he was inspired to run after seeing the many issues his patients struggle with. And Ruth Ann Palumbo's son, Jamie Palumbo, who says he wants to carry on his mother's legacy while carving out his own path.
These pieces that are coming out of our legislature are not Kentucky.
I will leave no stone unturned in order to talk to as many voters in this district as possible.
I'm not just saying things to be elected as a candidate. It's already backed up with my actions.
We hope you'll join us for election night coverage coming up from WKYT. That'll be one of the races that we will be following. Next week on Kentucky Newsmakers, among our scheduled guests are the Kentucky Secretary of Transportation, Jim Gray, the former mayor of Lexington, and Mike Halligan from God's Pantry Food Bank. We'll get up to date from him. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Kentucky Newsmakers. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there, and you make it a good week ahead.